Vital Hoops is for the culture.
Peace, Jumbo. Welcome to the VITAL HOOPS Podcast. My name is Fernando Cardenas, aka International XB. This is episode number 47, part 2, with the great brother Diallo Kenyatta, aka the Grinch of Pan-Africanism. Definitely encourage you to check out part 1 if you haven't yet. Please like, share, subscribe, and we got into a lot more important things on this part 2. So hope you enjoy it. Check it out, part 2 with Bro Diallo. All right, so let's get into veganism a little bit, right? Because I know you talk about it a lot, and
Do I?
Yeah, you do, and and I'm thankful for that because
I didn't know I did that.
You're one of the only Pan-Africans I hear really talking about veganism. So
you said a lot, not too much. So okay.
Right. It's good on my perspective, but why do you feel like it's important? You know, talk a little bit about veganism. Why are you a vegan? How did you go vegan? And why do you feel it's important? Let's start there.
Well, I became a vegan in 1992. And the reason I became vegan was initially becoming aware of animal rights. I was a activist on a community level activist, and I was a member of at that time the Stop the Violence Coalition, and I was doing work with the local Boys and Girls Club and the Block Brothers Association, doing things to because at this time in the United States it was some of the highest rates of homicide and violence. This is like in the peak of the crack epidemic, as they call it, they call it. But so I was doing a lot of work around anti-violence, and so I would just be reading various authors about, anti-violence, the value and preservation of life, and I had just started stumbling across those who say, yes, we have to preserve all life, animal life. And then just understanding that we human beings are animals, we're primates and animals, and then learning about just the environmental impact, the physical impact, and the fact that it's absolutely unnecessary.
Right.
The commodification of animals is unnecessary to sustain human life. We can sustain our health and well-being without having industrial scale cultivation and slaughter of animals, and learning about the environment. It wasn't really even about health, but I later started to learn about holistic health and chronic disease, how it impacted chronic disease. And I was radiography student, so I started learning more formally about human anatomy, physiology, and pathology, and the development of pathology, or even if for acute injuries and acute ailments, how your diet can impact that. So I eventually had a more holistic view besides just save the forests, save the animals, preserve the soil, preserve the waterways. It was more of environmental and animal rights, and then it kind of evolved into discussing holistic health and understanding how African people, especially in the United States, are ravaged by chronic diseases that are directly tied to our diet and our cultural relationship to the food and the food system. And that doesn't even go into health and beauty products. So I became vegan, but I wasn't really identified as a vegan activist or anything like that. But as I worked in various Black organizations, I found that there was no ecology component, and in a lot of organizations that were really good, been around since before I was born, that were really good on the politics, on local, regional, international politics, reparations, fighting police brutality, prisoner solidarity, and they didn't have any ecological components. So the organization I was part of at that time, I went to the chairman, Ajamu, of the National Black United Front, and I'm like, we ain't saying nothing about the quality of the air and the quality of the environment. We focus, which we should, the quality of the schools, the quality of our community and housing and all that, but the air we breathe, which is more essential than all that,
Right.
And so he's like, then go organize it, go figure something out. So we started cultivating organic, sustainable farming and urban and rural agriculture. We opened the first vegan, 100% vegan restaurant in Kansas City and started doing outreach and teachings about the vegan diet. And so then I started actually, engaging with in the community, Black Hebrew Israelites who already had strict dietary restriction. The local um, mosque, I think it was Mosque 47 of the Nation of Islam, who also had
Yeah.
restrictive diets and trying to say, well, eating once a day or refraining from swine, and maybe you should. And so, since they already had, dietary discipline as part of their community, so that's just kind of started going. And so, I've had everywhere I've lived, I've had vegan restaurants at times, vegan catering, vegan instruction, and things of that nature, and just promoting veganism. I tend to focus more on holistic health,
Yeah.
just because my community tends to be more responsive to the health component of it. But I always talk about the animal rights, animal liberation, and animal sovereignty, and the ecological components too.
Yeah. No doubt.
So I've been doing that since '92. And I also started seeing a lot of misconceptions and misinformation about veganism, where a lot of vegan advocates or proponents and a lot of gurus started making real absurdist claims about what veganism can do, whether veganism can cure you or prevent you from ever having any type of disease, reverse
Right.
aging,
Right.
and
Right.
all those type of things. So then I kind of found myself from going from just being advocating veganism to challenging a lot of these people, these gurus and these demagogues and these cults that both promote veganism but try to tie it to some type of supernatural,
Yes.
magical, or non-scientific claims. So I kind of didn't have very good where I was had good standing in the vegan holistic health community.
Right.
And like I said, there's a lot of veganism like restaurants that are owned and operated by cults.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the Said Society had a vegan grocery store, but I, even though I agree with the dietary, if you're using healthy diet or holistic diet to draw people in to manipulate them into a larger cult
Yeah.
framework and exploit them through the cult, that's when I even have to people who's like, oh, where people who really don't see all the layers or don't want to look holistically or completely at the issue will see me in one advocating for veganism and then condemning some vegan organization or some vegan movement or some vegan guru who's making absurdist claims and exposing our people to greater harm as they promote a more humane diet. So it
Right.
gets ugly at times and
Yeah.
exhausting.
Definitely. Yeah. I'm right now. I'm working to become a holistic health and wellness coach. So I'm going through some
So
things
you
right
about to
now.
become a guru. Send
No.
me
No. No.
$10,000
No. No.
and I
No.
will map your aura. And the
I'll call on.
$10,000 aura map, I will communicate with your ancestors and find your ethereal name from the cosmos. Uh-oh.
I'll call on you for that. You didn't bring back the guru. I remember one
Energetic
time you did an
healing.
episode.
Yeah. Yeah, this dude's out here making a lot of
No.
money. Okay.
No.
You can
But
donate to my show when you get up there, when you become one of these gurus.
no.
I'm sure. Okay.
But I think really it's an important component. Health and wellness. In general for our
Yeah,
people.
hey, listen. I'm not tearing down health and wellness.
Yeah. Yeah.
My
Yeah.
wife and I have been on this journey.
Mm-hmm.
We've done fruitarian, raw, vegan diets,
Right.
fasting. Both of our children were home birth, natural home birth.
Wow.
But
That's
everything we've engaged in has been scientific,
right. Right.
peer reviewed,
Mm-hmm.
grounded,
Yeah. Of
rational.
course.
So even as we go through health and our children were raised on breast milk and vegan diet,
Mm-hmm.
we consulted their pediatricians, we got them their regular. And so everything we done or refused to do has been rooted in scientific examination, in rational reasoned scrutiny.
Yeah.
So I fully support veganism, but veganism has been infiltrated by a lot of con men and hucksters and people making absurdist and false promises
Mm-hmm.
about veganism curing congenital ailments. Like
Mm-hmm.
veganism will not cure. It might abate some of the symptoms or even slow the progression of some conditions, but
Yeah.
veganism
It
is
can
not a
help prevent.
cure-all.
It can help prevent some
Right.
certain diseases, right? It can help
And that's
prevent
been
certain things
so. There's been
if you eat
days I've
healthy.
been
Yeah.
like, right, I've been like, well, I didn't do this or I couldn't make this obligation because I was sick or I was under the weather, and people, oh, you vegan, how
Yeah,
do you get
yeah,
sick?
they always, yeah, same here. Yeah. And then
Right. So
soon as I get a little bit sick, also they'll be like, "Oh, that's because you're vegan." Right?
yeah, but a lot of vegans push that nonsense.
That's true. That's
You know, a
true.
lot of vegans put that out there,
Yeah.
and like, we won't get sick. We're not supposed to age and
Right.
stuff. We will never go bald if you eat a vegan diet, or if you go vegan, it will grow your hair back. Dr. Sabi, mucus, all disease, you know, and got people not eat. Oh, you don't eat hybrid fruits and vegetables. You know, it's just about every food that's been cultivated for human consumption is hybridized. I mean,
No doubt. Yeah.
and people not eating seeded. Oh, I don't eat seedless watermelons.
Right. Right.
And don't understand the difference between, you know, hybridization, cultivation, and GMOs, and
Hmm.
confusing the two. So it's just,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think we
That-
would make more ground if we didn't make absurdist or
for
ungrounded
sure.
claims
Yeah.
about our movement and our lifestyle and our values. If we would just remain grounded and realistic, I think we would have more of a reach.
Yeah. Yeah. No doubt. I
Dr.
agree.
Lorraine Day is another kook. There's just so many kooks.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think we as vegans, as much as we promote veganism to our communities, it's our obligation to challenge. Just like if you're a Muslim or a Christian, and or if you're a Democrat, you gotta look internally and be willing to do internal critiques as much as you're doing critiquing those from outside your circle.
Yeah. 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 I hear that. I think when it comes to veganism, well, when it comes to holistic health, first of all, there's this component which is basically that everything is not up to us because there's also the air that we're breathing. The fact
Right.
that there's microplastic everywhere, that they just found microplastic in clouds. All these things that are happening around us. So basically, I feel like when we're talking holistic health, we should really be fighting, against the system of oppression that's
Right.
making things around us so toxic because we have so
But you
many
can
toxins within us.
yeah, and but you can also be realistic. You don't have to say, well, you should eat food of higher vibration. You
Mm,
know, when you could just say, listen, food contaminants concentrate up the food chain.
mm.
So herbivorous animals have a certain level of toxicity, but the animals that eat those animals have a higher level of toxicity because toxicity accumulates and concentrates up the food chain. So
Right.
the biggest, most carnivorous animals in most ecosystems have the highest buildup of toxins in their
Toxins. Yeah.
organs and soft tissues. So
Absolutely.
just encouraging humans to say, hey, to the extent that you're able, you should get low on the food chain. Now, this does not work for everyone. Veganism will not awaken humanity, will not free humanity. There
Right.
are certain populations, the Inuit people living in the Arctic, or the Maasai herdsmen in the
Right.
Horn of Africa or East Africa. Veganism wouldn't work for them.
Right. Right.
But anyone living in an industrial food system,
Absolutely. That's what I said.
if
Anyone living
you
in the
or if your
West.
food comes from industrial sources and you have access through willingness, or it's just what you were born into, it's just irresponsible from my point of view to
Yeah,
eat
I
a
agree.
standard American diet or a meat-based diet.
I agree.
You know, so I
Right.
understand that, you know, I would not go into an Inuit community or a Maasai or
No, of
a Twa community and tell them
course.
to stop their hunter gatherer or their herdsman lives. But I would go into a McDonald's in any Western country, westernized country, and be like, you people are
Yeah.
bad people doing a bad thing.
There's no industry behind what the Messiah are doing, right? That's also,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah,
And
exactly.
it's symbiosis.
Yeah, yeah,
It's a symbiosis, whereas meat eaters in this system are parasites.
yeah.
There's a difference between a predator in terms of the food chain and like predators help to sustain ecosystems. They found out when they took the gray wolf out of Yellowstone National Park, it greatly disrupted the ecosystem.
Of course.
And the elk and the deer and the buffalo that the wolves preyed on, they started to become sicker and have shorter lifespans, and their migration patterns were disrupted. Even the things that you don't even associate with predatory animals started to be like the grassland began to die off because when there were predators present, many of the grazing animals would graze in a higher altitude and basically have high ground to avoid predation. But when there were no predators, the grazing and herd animals came down to the riverside and would graze on the lower grasses, and then that would create soil erosion and then just break down the whole ecosystem. When the gray wolves returned and the herd animals started to return to their natural instinctual grazing lands, the whole environment bloomed. That is where meat eaters, carnivores or omnivores exist. But when your consumption habit extracts from and destroys ecosystem, then you know that's not a carnivorous or omnivorous relationship with your environment. It is a parasitic. So humans are not meat eaters, they're meat parasites. Humans are not milk consumers, they're milk parasites. Because the way they've set up their relationship with the animals they consume destroys the animals. That's why when lions or other predatory animals, their prey animals, they make them stronger. They consume the old, they consume the sick, and they consume the young. Whereas the strongest, most viral animals are able to go and thrive. But if you look at animals under human captivity, the cows are getting sicker and the chickens are getting sicker, more malignancy. They're having prions and their brains are becoming spongy. The 80% of all medicines produced are given to livestock.
Yeah, it's horrible.
So, and then that's making human disease, and humans degrade because when we take antibiotics, they aren't as effective because you've been consuming that same medicine through your food, and then that goes into the water system. So it is an extremely toxic, it is extremely colonial. A meat-centric diet is extremely colonial. It causes human death and suffering. It destroys ecosystems, and that's even before you get to how it harms and the abuse of the animal. So I think it is the obligation of any humane and mindful, and especially conscious and revolutionary person living in an under-industrial food system to adopt a vegan diet.
Yeah, appreciate that.
And to the extent you can, eat locally, eat sustainably, eat organic or non conventionally grown food. You know, it's do what you can, do your part.
Yeah. I always say I think like there's no bad reason to go vegan, right? Because like people ask me like, why are you vegan? I'm like, well, where do I start?
Yeah, you don't need no special knowledge or special position. I became vegan when I was living in the projects on food stamps. You know, and I was raised Midwest. I've had hog mogs, I had chitlins. I was raised on pork chop. I didn't had squirrel, possum, raccoon. I was raised in a Midwestern soul food diet. My people from the Louisianas and Oklahomas and the Midwest, Hereford cow. So it's not as though I came up in this. I discovered and learned on my own. So and I was living in we didn't use that terminology back in the 90s, but I was living in a food desert. And so, you know, but I was able to come up with different secure certain sources of food, negotiate with my grandmother to set aside a certain amount of the food budget to get my special foods. And a good, 40 to 50% of our food that she bought anyway was, beans and grains and things of that nature, some oatmeal, so a lot of your foods are already vegan. It's just certain components of it. You just have to adjust. It wouldn't even be, especially now. They got vegan peanut butter
now
cups.
it's easy. Now it's easy.
Yeah.
Now it's real easy. Yeah.
You go somewhere and get some vegan ice cream, it ain't nothing but pureed and frozen fruit.
Right. They used to make fun of me because I would freeze bananas, right? I would freeze bananas and then you know what I mean? Make my little ice cream with frozen bananas.
Nah, they got the good shit now. Last night I had me an ice cream sandwich, chocolate chip ice cream sandwich. For over 20 years, my favorite candy in the world was Reese's peanut butter cups. And I went over 20 years without having me a peanut butter cup.
Right.
And then they started making vegan peanut. It's just mad easy.
Yeah.
I remember when I go to the grocery store, I'd have to take a small shovel and a Michelin bag, and you just had to go to these weird ass, funny ass off-brand grocery stores. They weren't even grocery stores. They were just a barn with barrels of shit in there.
Now,
quinoa, and you
now the
scoop your
hard
shit.
part is that now the hard part is to try to stay healthy still as a vegan. Like I'd be like, yo, I gotta
Yep.
chill out with the junk food. I'd be like, but the thing
But
is
it's
like,
mad funny to me, people that are suspicious of soy and suspicious
yeah,
of
yeah,
pea protein, but
yeah, yeah.
you will eat a dead animal carcass
Right, right, right.
and you'll
They're like,
drink
soy
animal
has
excretion.
estrogen. You'll grow
Right.
like, nah, come on.
And you're
That's
drinking cow's milk
right, right. You're drinking cow pus but
and estrogen.
right, and
And
estrogen. Yeah,
estrogen.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Pure
Yeah.
estrogen.
Nah, that and then there's people saying, listen, you eat tofu and the soy is contributing to deforestation. And I'm like, yo, listen, but most of the soy that's growing is to feed the animals that you're growing into a place where they can't even turn
Come on
around.
now.
You know what I mean?
I think that's a deflection. I don't think they really care about that shit.
Nah, they don't. It is a deflection.
I don't think they care about that shit. I think it's a deflection.
They don't care about that at all.
You know. And here's the thing. If you think that I'm not going far enough, you have to at least meet me where I am before you can talk about me going further. So I'll have these discussions with my fellow vegans. But you
Right.
can't be, eating animal carcass and drinking animal excretions, telling me about the harm of soy or pea protein or, how the
They saying
injustice of
pea
how
protein is bad
avocados.
too. Oh yeah,
I don't
avocados.
like
They
it.
say you import them, so yeah,
Yeah, I'm willing to have those discussions if you're face to face with me.
yeah, yeah.
You can't beat your wife on a daily basis and then come argue with me that I didn't give enough thought and consideration to my wife's birthday present. Your wife worked hard and all you got her was that box of chocolate and flowers. You should do better. And I'm like, I'm not talking to that because your life is in the emergency room. So
Right.
you can't do worse than me and tell me how to improve on where. Meet me where I am, and then we can join together and see how we can advance. So I won't even have those discussions with swine eaters about soy. I would discuss soy with other vegans,
Right.
but I'm not going to discuss the merits of soy or the merits of or the morality or ethics of buying avocados out of season with swine eater.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm not going to talk about. I'm not going to be admonished for jaywalking by a murderer.
Yeah.
I
hear you.
like,
But they
get on my level.
They
and
be
then we
coming
can
at
talk.
us sometimes though. Like there's this lady that works where I work. I work at a school, and one of my coworkers, she's really into ecology, right? But she eats all types of meat, right? So today she was like, not today, it was a couple of days ago. She got on me because I was eating a banana, right? She's like, that's not in season. There's no bananas growing here in France. And and I'm like, well, you about to eat a steak and you're talking to me about a banana, right? Like, do you know what the impact that the cows have on you know what I'm saying?
But it's a difference between correcting someone's behavior and trying to justify your behavior. So I accept sincere correction, but I don't accept deflections and justifications.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, yeah. So this is a good segue to I want to talk about the eco side. I think, like you said, you mentioned this, but I think this is something that needs to be centered, in our Pan-Africanist struggle, right?
Right.
Can you please talk a little bit about that, about the eco side and why and how we should try to center that in our organizations and good ways to do it, because that's what I'm trying to do right now with the organization I work with,
Right.
and I just there's a new brother that just came into the organization and he's vegan. It's just two of us. So I was happy, like, yes, brother, let's go eat together. But it gets tough sometimes. And then the eco side is real and it's serious and we need to be on it. So can you please expand a little bit?
Well, just to explain, because I actually went to give a talk at a law school, Northwestern Law School, to their law students. And I had just casually mentioned because we were actually talking about Venezuela and U.S. imperialism in Venezuela. And I had mentioned ecocide and they were like, what the fuck is that? I thought it was a common because we kind of throw these terms around because we dwell in those spaces. And I don't think they were in any way ignorant. It's just, you don't know what you don't know. That's just uninformed. But ecocide is the destruction and contamination and or disruption or destruction of ecosystems. And despite all of our technology as human beings, despite all of our artificial structures we use to dwell in, to transport ourselves in, to transport the goods and services to each other, humans still depend greatly on the ecosystem. If you look at
Absolutely.
any resource, if you look at any resource that humans use, even though it might not be any quote unquote natural component to it, if you follow anything back, whether it's our bookshelves or our microphones and headphones, if we really walk it all the way back to its origin, it's going to be rooted in some type of natural resource. It's going to emerge from some ecosystem. And we derive materials from our ecosystem, mix them, manipulate them, construct or deconstruct them to make the world. But because we surround ourselves in so many artificial spaces, from clothing to buildings to cities and artificial borders and boundaries, I think human beings forget that we are not only part of an ecosystem, we emerge from an ecosystem, but we're still just as dependent on ecosystem. And parasitic capitalists like Elon Musk sell us and Bezos sell us pipe dreams of going to colonize some other planet so that we can surpass or move beyond Earth ecosystems.
It's very
And that is an absolute lie and a scam. So ecocide is the destruction of those very fundamental systems
mhm.
or biomes, or there's several or environments that we depend on. It is killing them off. Sometimes they are killed by contamination, dumping industrial waste in them. Sometimes they're killed, damaged by encroachment, human settlements or human living spaces encroaching on that environment. Sometimes they're killed by extraction, pulling materials, either cutting forests, or even if you're not cutting forests, you destroy the forest in order to mine or strip mining or mountain type removal. So there are several ways humans destroy ecosystem: desertification or over exploitation, overfishing, over hunting. But in most modern industrial practices, did not take into consideration the environment. Whereas some ancient cultures, traditional cultures, where we talk about, where I acknowledge, even though I'm atheist, that spirituality was intertwined with
Right,
the
right.
science, with industry, with the markets. And so they had concepts of sacred trees, of sacred waterways, of ancestral land that you couldn't impose upon. You couldn't till that soil. You couldn't drink or put waste or put a boat in that water. You couldn't cut those trees or those saplings because they were sacred.
Yeah,
When
we're
what
one with
today,
nature. Yeah, we're one
right,
with
scientists will call that ecology and preservation, where we call it holy or sacred or divine.
right.
So there was a component but a lot of times we were engaged in science, but because our colonizers didn't understand the rationale for what they were doing, they mistakenly called it mysticism or animism or spookism.
Mm.
And so we come to use their
Right, yeah, yeah.
terminology to define our phenomenon.
I hear
So
that's key. Yeah, yeah.
for the preservation of human life, we have to preserve the ecosystem. For to improve the quality of human life, we have to improve the quality of ecosystem. Right now, there is not one uncontaminated ecosystem. You go to the highest peaks of mountains, like you said, there is microplastic in the atmosphere, and there is dioxin in the deepest trenches of the ocean, industrial waste. And right now, we have the technology so that we can live within the limits of an ecosystem. Humans need to return to living within the limits of our ecosystem. We need to have not an extractive or a dominant relationship with the environment. We need to develop a symbiotic relationship to our environment. We need to create instruments and technologies to the extent that we can, that they can be used for the longest amount of time. And when they reach the end of their use cycle, they can be dismantled and made into other things.
Mm.
Now, the only reason this isn't done is because of capitalism.
Yeah.
It is more profitable to make things disposable. It is more profitable to pollute an environment than to do sequestration or capture of pollutants. It is more profitable to transport goods across large swaths of land as opposed to producing things locally for the environment. So it is the economy that is destroying the ecology. And those who have the greatest level of standing within the economy, the political, economics, social, cultural elites, the private jet motherfuckers, you know, the multiple mansions,
Yeah.
the hyper consumers are the main ones driving this, and the
Right.
industries that they own and control that we are forced to work for in order to avoid starvation and homelessness. And then they pretend it's nothing any of us signed up for. So the only way for humans to be ecological is for us to be socialist, for us to remove the profit motive, for us to remove the global political, economic, and social cultural elites. If we fail to do that, we will diminish the life sustaining capacity of the earth and eventually potentially destroy the life sustaining capacity of the earth. And that's why I'm so bothered by these Africans, these so called conscious Black people who think that we should economically defeat them, that we need to get as much money and as much industry and become equal or surpass them in their system. Because how can you define a victory winning power or securing territory on a dead or dying planet?
Yeah.
How? So I do respect, Earth Liberation Front, Animal Liberation Front, Extinction Rebellion. I do understand that there are parts of the European component, but I think that the African, the indigenous people of the world, the formerly and currently and the neo-colonized people of the world really need to step up. And environmental preservation is just not some mystic element of our antiquity, of our ancient past. Environment is science. It is necessity, and it is our birthright as human beings. And here in the West, they talk a lot about generational wealth.
Yeah.
And when you ask people about generational wealth, there is no component saying, well, biodiversity is not a component of generational wealth. We've had in 2023 over 200 reptilian, amphibian, mammalian species go extinct.
No doubt.
So the destruction of the ecosystem and in the fight against the industries and individuals that drive the destruction of ecosystem, the components of any people's culture that diminishes or devalues the ecosystem, any type of specious component of your culture to teach that man has dominion of the earth, that needs to be confronted and obliterated. We are animals. And we are dependent on the ecosystem, and no amount of technology, unless that technology removes our humanity, our need to consume, our need to breathe, our need to reproduce, our need to have cellular integrity, our need for blood and internal organs and cellular health. If we can remove all those things, the only way for us to continue on this path is for us to lose our humanity, which is happening. And again, you have these billionaire con men lying. It's not going to happen. We're going to go extinct. And the thing is, this has happened regionally. There have been cultures or civilizations in regions of continents or even on islands that have allowed their technological and market drives to be completely separate from their ecology. And those populations or those civilizations go extinct. But now everything is on a global scale. We don't operate on regional scale. Humans have leveled up from family groups to tribes to nations to whole continents to global systems.
Yeah.
So there is no sanctuary. There is nowhere to go to avoid the pollution. There's nowhere to go to avoid the fallout. There is nowhere to go where the mass extinction isn't happening. Even if you manage to set up some livable space on Antarctica, Antarctica is breaking up and melting. The animal species there are being driven to the North and South poles. So to me, I think the preservation of the ecosystem should be first priority for any organization.
I
And
agree.
ecocide, I think that is an inadequate term because
Okay.
really a lot of people don't understand their relationship to ecology, or the fact that we're embedded in ecology because we have all these barriers, artificial barriers between us and ecology. There was some European chef that came here and was holding up fruits to US youth
Uh-huh.
and asking them what this tomato or a potato, and they don't know what it is. And it's poverty. I don't blame these young people
Of
because
course. Yeah.
there are young people. I mean, there's been in my childhood nights I had a Snicker bar for dinner.
Right. Food
If it
deserts.
couldn't be
Yeah.
right, yeah. So I don't blame them, but this is the reality that we don't understand that. So when you say ecocide, it's like, okay, so there's no trees. Ain't no trees in my neighborhood anyway.
Yeah, that's why a lot
The
of
only
people don't
animals I
relate.
see are rats,
Hmm.
and roaches. But I think, and it also gives the impression for some to think that, well, ecocide means you can destroy the ecosystem and we will somehow survive. So I have given to take it to call it omnicide,
Omnicide. Okay. That
because
that includes
if
us
you're
then.
destroying all ecosystems, then that's omnicide. Ecocide on a global scale is omnicide. Everything dies,
Mm-hmm.
including humans.
Right.
And the Earth's life sustaining capacity is rapidly being diminished, even as human populations expand.
Yeah. And then there's also like I feel like there's a lot of these movements now have been co-opted, right? Just like our liberation struggles, the green movements, the quote unquote green movement have been co-opted. So I hear a lot of
Yes.
people talking about this here in France, and they're like, yeah, we're all about ecology and this and that. And then I sit through a whole thing and they never mention capitalism. They don't mention
Imperialism.
they don't
Yeah.
mention imperialism. They don't mention war, the impact
No.
of war. They don't even mention the meat industry, right?
No, they just said get paper straws,
Exactly. Say get
you
paper
know,
so turn off the lights.
purchase purchase a bike and get
Right.
LED light bulbs. Yeah,
Don't fly.
that's
Don't ever
yeah.
fly. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So
So yeah,
yeah,
that's
that's bullshit. I do say use paper straws. I do have a
right.
bike.
But that's not everything.
I do avoid flying whenever I can.
Mm,
And if I had the loot, I definitely would have an all electric car, but I'm not doing all that to delude myself to think we have to destroy these industries, the
mm,
industry of war, and take away these people's capacity to manufacture and wage war. We have to destroy these multinational corporations. We
mhm,
have to bring down their boards of directors and the institutional investing class. Those are the enemies of the planet.
mm.
So I think that ecology has to come to the fore.
Yeah. Okay. If you can, what would be some good ways, to try to bring that to the forefront in our, in our organizations, in Pan-Africanist organizations?
Education and demonstration. First, you can try to live and function, be a living example of ecological practices within your community, and then educating your community about the true source, talking about industrial capitalism, showing people that their wealth and well-being, their ability to live a dignified life is not a product of capitalism and industrial production.
Mhm,
That our true well-being comes from our collective, our cooperation and sharing. So you first have to adopt and embrace the ideas and practices for yourself personally, and then at every opportunity when you're engaging with the community, when you're constructing and executing organizational projects and formations within your community, you
mhm.
have to just educate when
Yeah.
there's disruptive weather, landslides, um, or all this other. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
countless heat waves and the massive deaths. All of those are moments where the media will try to obfuscate and, like you said, come up with these non-solutions. And those are opportunities for us to tell what is the true cause of
Mhm.
these growing and more frequent environmental catastrophes. What is the true cause, and advocating for the true solutions. you know so there will be, so And a lot of times you'll talk to people like you about these issues and it might click. So they run into a brother or sister that informs them about the ravaging and hyper exploitation of our natural resources and ecosystems. And that is colonialism. Environmental destruction is colonialism,
Right.
imperialism.
Right.
And then the fact that the with global warming and the horrible consequences of global warming, the nations that have contributed the least to global warming, that have emitted the least amount of carbon per capita, stand to suffer the greatest. And as global warming's catastrophes, crop failures, more and more tropical diseases being intensified and expanding across the globe, um, contamination of fresh water by inundation of seawater, just the many problems. If humans have not come up with a cooperative system, a humane system of distribution of resources and development of material goods, we're going to doom ourselves. We're either going to work together to endure climate change or we're going to end up cannibalizing each other. Because we see how all the conflicts that arise when there's relatively abundance of resources. There's abundance of habitable land. Even now, the majority of food, we produce enough food to feed everybody. There's enough housing infrastructure in many places, or if not housing infrastructure, enough land that can be developed.
Yeah.
And these people are already telling us with an overproduction of goods and overproduction of resources, they're talking about, well, we need human population reduction. There's too many people in the world. When there's too many rich people in the world, the problem is not the lack of resources. The problem is the concentration of resources in the hands of the few. So we're going to be unified. Africans will be unified, and in reality, humanities will be unified. We'll either be unified in the struggle for liberation, or we'll be unified in the desperate scramble for the last scraps of food and high ground left. We have to destroy, we have to subvert, not integrate, not outcompete, not elevate within the systems and institutions of global white hegemony and industrial and finance capitalism. We can't coexist with those two conditions on this planet. And they're two extremely dysfunctional, unsustainable, and illegitimate systems. That's the fight.
No doubt. I appreciate that. A quick segue. You said the other day that, the world is not crazy and chaotic, but it's capitalist and colonized. And I think that was so important, right? Because I heard you say that, it's not all humans. I used to be that way too. I used to be like, well, listen, we're fucking up the planet, right? I used to be like, we all the time, as if, but it's not all humans, right? Like you were like, you said, name an indigenous population anywhere around the globe, that has engaged in this.
Yeah, that's the whole mankind, humankind discussion. I say our oppressors, white people, Europeans are very fond of saying mankind is warlike, mankind is superstitious, human beings are doing this. Absolutely. They're very generous when it comes to the blame. But when it comes to accounting, they're very specific. They don't say this is mankind's profits.
Right.
They don't say this is humanity's land. They say this is this specific person's land. They're very specific when it comes to intellectual property and inventions. They don't talk about, oh, this is something that was invented by humans. This patent, this copyright is belongs to this person. They're very specific when it comes to whose money shit it belongs to, who has land that belongs to them. They're very specific when it comes to wealth, in distributing and what belongs to who. But when they talk about, the destruction of the environment, they're specific. They don't say DuPont.
Right.
They don't say the Coke industries. They don't say Monsanto and Cargill did this. They're like, humans destroy their environment.
Right.
When they talk about, man, it's just violence. Humans just are tribal by nature. They don't say, well, this particular group is engaged in a mass murder of this particular group to extract this resources or to secure this land or to drive this population to this place. So whenever you hear, especially a person from a colonizer group, talk about mankind, believe you me, they're trying to duck responsibility for some shit they did. So I don't accept, just like they don't say that's mankind's corporation, that's mankind's profit.
Right.
That's mankind, that's humanity's mind, Holtan. I'm not going to say humans are destroying the planet. I'm going to say specific names in specific industries and specific races and specific cultures are doing this shit. Mankind is not driving genocide in the Congo. That's not mankind. Mankind didn't set up the burgeoning multiple civil wars in the Horn of Africa. That goes specifically to British Empire, the British monarchies and British elite. I'm not going to say mankind is committing genocide in Gaza,
right?
Or that the genocide in Gaza is a result of just human nature. So we're going to be specific. We got to stop talking that mankind shit. There's always a person or an industry or an institution that has an address, that has a name, and we even have photographs, and we even have written or videotape confessions. So yeah, I don't play that mankind shit. No, well, let's be more specific. If I go out and commit a crime, I can't talk about the nature of humanity when I go to court.
Right.
I can't talk about human nature or the plight of humans or mankind. They'll be like, no, you did this and you have to be accountable.
Yeah.
So that mankind shit 9 times out of 10 is a hustle and a scam when somebody's telling you about what humans do. No, very specific individuals or classes within humanity are doing the bad shit.
For sure. And then we have ended up.
And when you see
speaking
wealth,
like that
say,
ourselves.
look at mankind's wealth. When you see good shit, say that's mankind. When you see wealth and resources and arable land, when you see look at mankind's homes. That's humanity's houses right there. Let's go live in them motherfuckers. Let's go take it. But when it's bad shit, then you don't be non-specific. Be specific about the bad shit and be universal about the good shit.
Yeah, for sure. And then because we have also ended up using these terms ourselves, we end up being like, oh, look at what we're doing to the animals. Look at what we're doing to the right.
Who is we? Right.
Right.
Malcolm X was dealing with this. Malcolm X was talking about Africans here in the West during the height of the space program and the race to the moon. Black people walking around talking about those are our astronauts.
Right.
And he was like, they won't even let you near the damn shuttle. You talking about our astronauts and our troops. I hear black people talking about our troops, our government. Malcolm X said more than half a century ago, say the government, say the military, say this country. Don't say my country. Don't say our troops. Say the corporate troops, the imperialist troops, the war criminal fascist troops. Don't ever say, oh, our troops or our military.
But some FBAs are still trying to claim Malcolm.
Yeah. Oh, there's some race traitors. Foundational Black Americans and American descendants of slavery are nothing more than old school Uncle Tom House Negro race traitors.
For sure.
And they have stolen, they have co-opted justice struggles such as the reparations movement.
Yeah.
But they are hyper-integrationists. They don't seek liberation for African people. They seek integration and equality. The leaders and founders of the movement said the goal of their organization is that Black people be made white. Black people who have U.S. citizenship and lineage in the United States dating back to chattel slavery should be made white, which means that we should be equal to white people, which means that African people in this nation with the citizenship should have all of the spoils, to fully and equally share in the spoils of genocide, colonialism, and the legacy of slavery. And in exchange for that, we should be obligated to fully support and embrace the United States in its ongoing and future colonial, imperialist, and genocidal agendas. It is a movement and an ideology every self-respecting Africans should not only reject, but challenge at every opportunity. I denounce foundational Black America. I denounce ADOS and anybody who has sympathy or solidarity with those reactionary movements.
Yeah, they want to live good within the system of oppression. That's it.
Race traitors.
Right. All right. So man, you've been generous with your time. I appreciate that. I did want to talk about this thing, man, because me being Afro-Cuban, I've heard you talk about the Latino thing. You
Yes.
know, I personally feel like I've had this conversation with a lot of people, and it's a tough one because what I say is that Latino to me is this construct that was made up to divide us. As African people, because a lot of our people that speak Spanish, they identify with as Latinos and not as being Africans. Where, the only difference is, they speak Spanish, and some of our brothers speak French, some speak English because they were colonized by the English, we were colonized by the Spanish, right? Right? It's dividing us from the rest of our brothers as far as identity.
Yeah.
And so I've heard you speak on it. And then when you were speaking about Latinos not saying the N-word and all of that, right? You were not including Africans who live in these countries, right? Or were you?
Well, here's my issue with even Afro or Black Latino people.
Okay, yeah.
Because the N-word is specific to Black people in America.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know there are slurs and terms of Black people in Latin America, even African people from Francophone cultures, that they have particular terms and slurs that they use amongst each other. I have a lot of very near and dear Nigerians.
Mm-hmm.
Nigerians have, between not even the nation of Nigeria, but specifically like Yoruba.
Yeah.
Or I know Kenyans, and you got a Luo or Kikuyu. Everybody has their terminology, their culture.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I first moved to New York, was my first time being around. I was living in Brooklyn, just off Eastern Parkway. And every time I engaged with a Black person, they were either from Central Latin America or from the Caribbean. And they had a lot of terms they would use against each other in mockery or just in terms of endearment that if I said it as a Black American would be a slur.
Mm.
And I would hear it and I understood it immediately. I picked it up immediately. I never had any desire.
Right.
Any desire. And they would often, when they were joking with each other, burning a spliff or something, and they would make comments about, oh, banana boat and things like that, or they would mock each other about la migra or the immigration status.
Mm.
Me, as a Black person born in the United States, I know when Black people say that to our immigrant Africans who are immigrated to the United States, it's something different.
Mm-hmm.
If I say, like, I have a friend from Guyana and a friend from Jamaica, and they start getting into a spat, and he's like, you don't know what you're talking about. You just got off the boat.
Mm.
And he's like, nah, I know what I talk about. And they're speaking to each other in patois.
Right.
That's different to me as a Black person born in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a disagreement with a brother or sister from the Caribbean or from Central America. And I'm like, you don't know what the fuck you're talking. You just got off the boat. It hits different.
Mm-hmm.
Because even though we are both Africans, we both have the same struggle, we both have the same origins, our specific culture, just like the Kikuyu and the Luo, the Hutus and the Tutsis, or whatever these various tribal groups have their own specific things. And when you engage with that community, because my son's girlfriend, she's Afro-Latino. She's a Black Mexican.
Okay, yeah.
And many Black people don't even know. A lot of Black people, when they ran off the U.S. plantation, they wasn't about to cross all that hostile territory to make it to the north. Many Africans, countless numbers, because nobody was keeping census, of Africans ran to the south. And there are huge communities of Black Mexicans.
Yeah. Absolutely.
They call each other, and I'm just saying these terms just to get like wetback and things of that nature. They say amongst themselves that I would never say. So it is curious to me that someone that wasn't really raised in that cultural environment, because even me being born and raised in the Midwest, we have terminology and jargon that we use amongst each other that a Black person from the West Coast wouldn't use. And it just would be insincere. If I go to Vallejo and I'd be like, what's up, fool, 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 and start using it just,
Right.
what is the, exactly. So even though I would not lash out at a black person from outside of the US calling me, oh, what's up, my N-word, I would have to have a conversation. I
Right.
wouldn't respond the same way I would say if a non-black person saying that to me, but I would like to have a conversation. Like,
No doubt.
this is how my father spoke and my grandfather spoke. And like I said, having interacted with my brothers and sisters from across the globe, I know everywhere has its lingo, has its slang, has its insults in terms of endearment, and its very organic way of using it, whether
For
you want to
sure.
use it in a hostile manner or in a pleasant manner. It's just curious to me why that particular word kind of has to go everywhere when it has a relatively unique impact in a relatively unique population of Africans.
Yeah, no doubt. I understand what you're saying. Yeah, like I was saying, when it comes to this whole Latino thing, racism in South America is wild, right? It's crazy. Like people don't understand, and even in Cuba, what I'm saying, people think because it's a socialist country, they're like, oh no, it's socialist, it's like pretty much every corner of the world, at least that I've seen, the darker you are, the lower you are, and as far as the social status, and in Cuba it's no different, actually. There's the white Cubans come up with all these funny jokes, they think they're funny and things like that, and it's like super racist shit, right? But when we're in Cuba, we're never like, oh, we're all Latinos. It doesn't work
Exactly.
that
I
way.
said I said there are no Latinos or Hispanics in Latin America.
Absolutely.
And really, there are no brown people in Latin America.
Yeah.
All those people magically transform into these groups once they cross that southern border.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm very familiar with that. I've had friends from Cuba, and I had one friend who and I asked him, I'm like, what are you? And not what are you, because it was obvious looking at him that he was a white man, but he was from Cuba. And I asked him, who do you identify with in terms of your history and culture? Because you do have a culture and a history and a lineage. I said, do you more identify with the natives of your land, or do you more identify with the conquistadors? And he's like, I'm a conquistador, hands down.
Yeah.
I'm a conquistador, and that's what fills me with pride when I look at myself, and if I'm going to teach my children about their heritage, I'm gonna teach them about the triumphant colonizers, not the resistance of the natives.
You know how a lot of brothers in the States are looking to be like, no, actually, I'm not African, I'm Indian, and all these things. Well, the same shit happens in Cuba.
Yeah.
They'd be like, no, my ancestors, no, I'm not African, I'm Indian when we know damn well they killed almost every single tribe in Cuba. Like, it's like
depopulated Puerto Rico, many of the islands completely depleted, devoid of life.
Absolutely. So there's very few people that are actually, of the native tribes that used to live in Cuba. Most of us are African, and then some of us are, obviously a lot of us are mixed with, the
we confuse race, ethnicity, and nationality. We're of the same race, but we do have different ethnicity or different nationality. And that can strengthen us or tear us apart, depending on how we carry it and how we utilize it. But a lot of times in this country, when people come, and it's really a disrespect thing, because when Europeans come to the United States, they're very keen on saying, well, this is a Frenchman, this is a Scandinavian, this is a German. But in the United States, those are all Latino, or coming from a continent 10 times the size of Western Europe. Europe is not even a continent.
Right.
They were like, oh, those are Hispanics, Latinos, and all those people are Asians.
Right.
And what a Korean, Indonesian, Vietnamese, Chinese, that's Asian. That's another dehumanizing component.
Yeah.
But let a French person come over here and you identify them as anything other than a Frenchman.
Right.
Or can you imagine if they just lumped all these people together, and you go anywhere, like you go here, we got Greek town, we got Polish town, and where they distinct. Even though they all figure out how to be white and racist the same way, they understand like, oh, when it comes to our racial solidarity for our racial interests, they're very clear on it. But they're also very clear on their ethnicities. They're very clear on their nationalities.
Right.
And they know when to fuse and when to, form together like Voltron, and they know when to have integrity for their cultural integrity as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So I don't need a brother from Kenya or a brother from Ghana or a brother from Cuba or Panama to deny their Panamanian heritage and the specifics and the uniqueness of their route and path. I don't need them to pretend like, oh, I'm just black and that's it. I think that we can acknowledge and fully engage and enjoy the wealth of our unique ethnic and cultural experiences and have respect for the great, because on the continent of Africa alone, there's more biogenetic diversity amongst Africans in Africa than everybody else in the world combined.
Yeah.
So I don't think that unity requires suppression of that or the erasure of that. I think that can be strengthened and be brought, and we can appreciate, respect, and unify
for sure
with each other's with diverse cultures and identities.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. I think though, as far as us, Africans from South America, I think we need to get rid of that Latino identity. I don't even like the term Afro Latino, to tell you the truth. Like I'd be like, I'm Afro Cuban, but Latino to me is just kind of like, and then some people identify as like just Spanish. Like now what do we identify by our oppressor's language?
I ain't never been to Spain.
Like we're Spanish. Like the fuck is that? So that's just kind of crazy. But let me ask you this. There's one problem that we have, in Cuba. I engage with a lot of brothers and sisters. In Cuba, I used to work with a lot of, anti-racist organizations and all of that. And, sometimes we would have problems, with the government, because we're actually not allowed to have independent organizations in Cuba, right? And when we're trying to tackle racism, we trying to be between ourselves, Afro-Cubans. We don't want to, and they don't like that. They push.
I once read an article where they say in Cuba, that's the only country in the world where the police identify as revolutionary.
And that's some bullshit, because the police is on us in Cuba. So
exactly.
The so-called
and I get in a lot of trouble because there's a lot of black leftists who venerate, who worship Cuba here in the U.S.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who really worship. And I do think Che, Fidel. In fact, my son is in Miami, and I said, when you get off the plane, as soon as you touch ground in Miami, I want you to stand up and scream, "Viva Fidel!" And he was like, "Dad, I'm not doing that shit." But I do have great respect and appreciation, but I do think that it is a betrayal. I think we should be as vocal about the racism in Cuba specifically, and Latin America in general, as a stance of solidarity with the African people who are still suffering and dealing with overt racism in Latin America.
Yeah, for sure. And
people get mad at me because I never get up and say black and brown unity.
Yeah.
I ain't with that black and brown shit, because it don't mean shit. You can't have your foot on my people's neck south of the border and then come north of the border and pretend like you're gonna have solidarity with me. But I'm sorry, go on.
No, it's fine. I appreciate that. But it's really tough right now. The situation in Cuba is very tough for everybody, but obviously our people are at the bottom, right? Our people are at the bottom for various reasons. We know obviously the U.S. embargo, but there's a lot more going on within the island, right? So a lot of brothers and sisters have been struggling their whole lives, and what they've been seeing around them their whole lives. I've had the opportunity to travel and everything, so my case is very different. But what they've seen their whole life is a lot of, I don't use propaganda in a negative sense, just in general, a lot of socialist propaganda, their whole lives. That's all they're seeing, It's kind of having the opposite effect, the negative effect. Now they're looking towards capitalism, and they're looking to, they want all the materialist things. And soon as they get to the States, all they do is they can't wait to consume, to go to McDonald's, and they, you know what I'm saying? So it's difficult. It's very difficult to explain to my brothers and sisters, like, yo, listen, that's, I know what we're going through here is tough, but trust me, capitalism is destroying the whole world. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, well, Dale Jones always said the white man is more deadly at the negotiating table than he is on the battlefield.
Mm.
Or he's more effective at winning peace than he is at winning wars. So even though the Cubans fought a valiant struggle, you see that the propaganda and the non-combat, and that's why even here in the United States there are many black nationalists and black liberatory people that's like, oh, we got to arm ourselves and we got to train. And I'm like, if we don't get ideology together, if we don't get the correct ideology, and even though, and I'm glad you're calling it out, because even when people are fighting against imperialism, fighting against totalitarianism, fighting against theocracy, they always make time for racism. They always seem to have time, no matter what any non-white group is doing or what struggle any non-white group, because people got mad at me. I was getting in trouble for calling out and consistently calling out the anti-black racism throughout Latin America when people just want to reflexively say black and brown unity. And like I said, my first question to any brown, quote unquote, brown, Latino, Hispanic person is what is your race, ethnicity, and nationality? That's my first question. My second question is, what is your position and what have you done about the racism in your own country?
Right.
Before you can call solidarity and want my solidarity with your immigration issues, when I acknowledge it. I acknowledge the discrimination, exploitation from labor to family displacement, children. I oppose it. I generally think that empires, nobody's obligated to respect the territorial integrity of an empire. Meaning, if your military is all over the world, people from all over the world have a time. Any way you can get here, come here and get yours because your shit is here. And you have a right to follow your resources. But you can't cry, or as my wife says, you can't cry freedom with your foot on somebody else's neck. So you can't come from a country that's oppressing my people and come here and expect me to hold solidarity with you, and you're not actively engaged against the injustice against African people in your own country. People get mad at me even in Palestine. They want me to stop talking about the Islamic and Arab atrocities against African people, the ongoing Arab slave trade, even in the territory of Palestine, where the Palestinians are second-class citizens in Israel and Africans are fifth-class citizens, and the significant population of Afro-Palestinians. So even though at the same time they're fighting against Zionist genocide, they making time for Arab racism against African people, and they get mad at me. And I'm like, yeah, I oppose Zionism and I oppose all colonization, but I'm never going to shut up about it. People are like, oh, you want to talk about Islam in a time like this? I'm like, yeah, there's never not a time to bring up my people. And
they turn a blind eye. Some people turn a blind eye to that.
I say there's a big difference between servitude and solidarity. Right now, at the height, since the beginning, going back decades, African people, the African nations have given more resources and attention to displaced Palestinians and Palestinian refugees than they have for internally displaced Africans on the continent. When internally displaced Africans, for coup d'etats and internal strife and conflict and the internally displaced Africans outnumber displaced people from the Middle East, sometimes 20-1 or more. So a lot of what we're calling solidarity is nothing but Black servitude. And a lot of Black people think, well, engaged in servitude for a leftist cause or a progressive cause is better than being engaged in servitude for right-wing or capitalist or establishment, for the status quo. But servitude is servitude. So I advocate for real solidarity, meaning that if you come from a population that is currently engaged in some form of organized systemic injustice against my people, and you are not able to simultaneously, as you fight the status quo oppression, to fight your internal racism, your internal exploitation, then I can't say that I stand in solidarity to you. So it's not enough to be anti-Zionist if you're Arab. You have to be anti-racism and anti-Zionism, anti-blackness and anti-Zionist. And we feel, well, at this time, anytime. Anytime somebody's telling you it's not time for it, then shut the whole shit down until you've got time. That's my position.
I hear that.
Because African people, to quote Dr. Jeremy Clark, African people don't owe nobody nothing but an ass whoop. So to have Black solidarity should come, just like buying your new phone, it should come with terms and conditions.
Yeah.
And our solidarity should be something that is hard to secure and easy to lose because it is valuable. That's why everybody, I don't care where it is. I don't care if it was Poland fighting against the USSR. No matter where you find struggle, they're going to bring up an African freedom fighter. They're going to reference and try to tell, they're going to be, they're in Palestine quoting Frantz Fanon. They're all over. And I respect that. Just like Che is a universal symbol of resistance. You understand that. So we understand that these symbols of resistance in African people, referencing the Haitian Revolution, and it's just time for African people, I don't know, what's that online thing, to know our worth and to act on our worth.
Yeah, for sure. It's important because, in Cuba, they want to push the nationalism thing, right? And they even came up with this term called color cubano, like Cuban color. Like there's one color, we're all the same. But then meanwhile, our people are at the bottom. You know what I'm saying? Our people are at the bottom, and so
Yeah. And when I call out racism in places like Cuba, they want to say, "Oh, you sound like a CIA agent."
Yeah. That's
you
what
sound like
to
you
me
get
too.
your information from the Pentagon. You get your information.
Yeah, it's difficult for me. It's difficult for me.
So fucking be it. You know what I'm saying? So be it. You can't carve freedom with your foot on my people's neck.
For sure. Yeah.
And I do not in any way embrace or support servitude. I'm only for solidarity. And solidarity means that you deal with your internal issues and give them equal weight. Your people's violation against my people carry equal weight with whatever violations you're fighting against outside that's being imposed on you. And the people telling me want to say I'm Islamophobic or this ain't the time to talk about not just Arab racism. We just saw the slave markets after Obama, the war criminal serial killer Obama, assassinated Muammar Gaddafi, and the open air slave markets came back to that region of Africa, and African people enslaved all over the UAE. Throughout the Arab world, racism and slavery is still rampant throughout the Islamic world, and the Islamic oligarchs are allowing it. And you want me to stand in solidarity with you, and you don't speak on this at every opportunity?
Right. Yeah.
I don't get down like that.
That's when we say black first. It's not black only, but it's black first.
It's not black only, but it's black first.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So we have to talk about these things. Yeah, no doubt. So we have to be. Are we going to be in solidarity with our brothers and sisters everywhere, or just with the, So I think that's key. But I appreciate you. Talking on that.
I appreciate you too. Oh, you closing out? You kicking me out?
One last thing before the book recommendation. Okay, I just want to talk about culture. Before we roll out. Amilcar Cabral said national liberation is necessarily an act of culture. Right? I hear you talk a lot about Del Jones, and I've heard your book reviews on culture bandits, which are really great. Today everybody talks about the culture. People who are fucking sellouts, people who are everybody's like, yeah, we're doing it for the culture, but all they're doing is selling a product or some stupid shit. I decided to, on my podcast, adopt the phrase for the culture, but really for the culture. When we talk about the culture, we're talking about a revolutionary culture, right? To me, I believe our culture needs to be, Afro-centered and revolutionary, right? Culture of resistance. So can you please talk a little bit about that, the importance of culture?
Yeah, well, culture is an organism. It's a living thing. And it goes through stages of contraction, expansion, birth, aging, death, and rebirth. One thing we have to understand about culture is culture, by definition, has to serve the people. A lot of times, I find, especially with African people who are rediscovering our African culture, they start to subordinate themselves to the culture. And then they start to admonish other people to embrace the culture without even articulating or demonstrating to us how the culture will serve its participants. If the culture does not speak to the needs and well being of those who adhere to the culture, the people have a right to change, manipulate, or even abandon the culture.
Mm-hmm.
So, our culture, as you said, must be revolutionary. African people are under genocidal oppression, living on a planet that is being ravaged to the point of ecosystem collapse. So, any culture that does not acknowledge and confront this specific issue can't really be identified as culture.
Mm.
It can't be identified as culture because if you look in science, when they want to develop an organism, they create a culture in a petri dish. And in that culture, are all the components needed, contained to help something to grow, to thrive. And it has a protective layer against it. So our culture has to encapsulate us, surround us, we have to be within it, and within it, we have to either secure and input the things if they're not already present, and the things that are there that are life affirming, we have to develop and protect, and the things that are in our culture that harm us, even if it's something that arose from us, but more likely than not, that is a byproduct of outside manipulation and influence, we have a right to purge things
For
from
sure.
our culture.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I had this one of my shows called the tradition trap or the tradition fallacy.
Mm-hmm.
We don't do shit simply because we always did shit. If someone says you should do this because we've always done it, or you shouldn't do that because we never did it, that's not valid.
That's not good
So
enough. Yeah.
there should be fundamental characteristics to our culture. Or
Mm-hmm.
as Dr. Moran Bani said, a Sealy, certain core values with or core ideas within our culture. Respect for humanity, the cultivation and protection and the centering of children, respect for elders. So there are certain universal things that you will find in across African cultures
Yeah.
that we can all agree upon, but then other places it has to be tweaked, and we
Yeah.
have every right to do it. We construct and cultivate our culture.
Mm.
And we evaluate whether how we have constructed and cultivated our culture as being good or bad according to the outcomes. Are we thriving as a community, as a people?
Mm-hmm.
Are we reducing or able to challenge or prevent hostile forces and hostile agendas being imposed on us? Does our culture orient us towards identifying and addressing active threats or potential threats? Does our culture orient us and motivate us to secure the material resources that we have? So, culture should be under constant scrutiny.
Mm-hmm.
It is something that is constantly in motion.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as, okay, we got a culture and we can rest in it.
Right.
Because your culture will stagnate, it will become bloated and toxic.
Mm-hmm.
So culture is evolutionary, it is organic, it is an organism that needs to be fed, that needs to be purged, that needs to be sometimes it is necessary to expand it. There are other parts that need to be guarded and protected.
Mm-hmm.
So it's relatively complex, but the simple thing to understand is that culture must serve the people,
People. Yeah.
speak to the interests, desires, improvement, security of the people. There are certain things. If you go to people and say, well, you should embrace our culture or your culture, you need to tell people what is your obligation to the culture, and if you meet your obligation to the culture, what can you expect from the culture? It's reciprocal.
No doubt.
And too often we ask people to give or put into the culture, and we don't identify what they are to receive. So I think culture is important. I think it's something we need to constantly not just take for granted.
Yeah.
And there are certain components of the culture, like the aesthetic components of the culture, many of us have down. I think that our aesthetically,
Yeah.
the music, the dress, the rhythm is really beautiful, but our political culture, our economic culture is just in most places in the Black community, our economic culture is just a bastardized mimicry of white economic culture and
Right.
values.
Right.
So a lot of times when we do have very rich and secure and thriving components of our culture, we start to neglect or take for granted. Culture deals with all areas of human interactions, intimate, personal relationships, our politics, our valuation, or our very concept of reality, our mentality, our principles, our worldview.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes all these into consideration, and you have to always be looking at it because what served you. I know people that are trying to recreate, you know, Che Guevara's guerrilla struggles when the weapons and the technique and the surveillance that Che Guevara faced are totally different than now. So you can take Che's values, his revolutionary fervor, but you can't simply replicate. It's the same thing with I know people that are literally trying to reproduce Black Wall Street, not that which is obscene and absurd, or trying to replicate or just reproduce whole cloth the UNIA Garvey's movement.
Right.
So that is not that mimicry, that reproduction is harmful. That's not culture. That's stagnation. That's regression. And a lot of times we start to venerate and worship culture instead of just being culture. Culture depends on us. The culture is the people.
Mm-hmm.
And if the culture is sick or the people are sick, you got to constantly work on it. You got to constantly develop it. So it's kind of hard. We could do a whole discussion of just culture alone.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but culture is component, and our culture has to be Pan-African, and our culture has to be revolutionary.
I agree.
Those are two elements of our culture, but outside of that, there's a lot of things that we can tweak, that we can work on, that we can adjust.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Before I let you go, I like to do this thing here on the podcast where we do book recommendations. If you have 2 or 3 books that you would like to recommend, I know that's a difficult thing. I know that's a difficult thing because there's a lot. But I just heard you recommend a Black Panther little book that was really great. You know, a little pamphlet.
That's free online.
Yeah. I got it. Soon as you talked about it, the bits and pieces.
Yeah. I've done some discussions on that.
Oh yeah, that's a great one. But if you have a couple books that you'd like to recommend,
I have some in my head.
And let me ask you this, man: when are you gonna write your own book?
Don't start that mess. All right, let me. But yeah, I actually am working on a book though. I ain't even gonna lie. But every time I say it, I'm just not being very disciplined.
You get in
trouble.
I
am working on a book, so I can guarantee by this spring there will at least be a draft of the book.
Wow, that's dope.
So I got some books here. Oh, I like this one too. How many books you say?
Listen, man, if you got time, I got time. Nah, let's try to keep it between, try to keep it under 5.
Okay. Well, I'm just pulling books off the shelf. But let me just say some books that I don't have. I just finished reading. I read Dr. Jarad Ball's book, The Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power.
Yeah.
That goes. Another author, B. Creamer, where we were talking about culture, which is another book, Who Stole the Soul, which is kind of like an update on the Culture Bandits area of scholarship and cultural critique. That's another good one. Locking Up Our Own is a good book. Locking Up Our Own.
Who wrote that one?
And Forman Jr.
Okay.
I had to look up his name. I just finished that book. I had picked it up and I was reading it, and then I got these other books in the mail. Then I put it down for like 3 months, and I kind of picked it up and started it over again. And it's some. I don't want to spoil. Can you spoil a nonfiction books? We've already lived through the shit.
No, you can't spoil.
But it made me look at some of our heroes, like not in any way disparaging, but sometimes that even our most radical and brilliant thinkers can be rather short-sighted. Yeah. So if you read Locking Up Our Own, and especially the passages and some of the positions of people like Kwame Ture, in relationship to drug legalization and things of that nature. So it's good to know that some of our greatest people struggle and how their ideas and positions evolve.
Yeah.
Sure. So since we were talking about ecology, this is the wrong volume, but it's this book, Endgame, by Derrick Jensen. But this is volume 2.
Okay.
Get volume 1.
Volume
if
1?
you read volume 1, you can pass on volume. After reading volume 1, it pretty much says everything you need to say.
Okay.
This book, I started reading B.F. Skinner and Behaviorism because Bobby Wright, if you ever read his writings or seen his lectures, they seem like he says a lot of things that are like, he's a very dynamic speaker. There's a lot of humor
Right.
and a lot of folksism. He's a Southern brother, even though he was educated and organized in the cities. He's got like a folksy wisdom. I don't know if you ever interact with people from the U.S. South.
Yeah, of course.
They
Yeah,
just,
from the South. Yeah.
yeah, very good story. So anyway, he says things that you kind of think are just like sayings or whimsical or hyperbole,
Yeah.
but everything this man says, no matter how outlandish it is very scientific and literal. So anyway, he said that this man, B.F. Skinner, almost single-handedly destroyed the civil rights struggle and the Black liberation struggle.
Okay.
And I'm like, but then you start to read this and another one of his book, Beyond Freedom and Dignity, and you'll see how they went from oppressing and repressing African struggle using means of military and physical intimidation to utilizing more targetedly, not just propaganda and brainwashing, but using means of reward and giving in abundance and giving people titles and positions and status as a means to oppress them. Because we always think oppression means when your oppressor takes shit from you and keeps shit from you.
Right.
But a lot of times your oppressor can entrench your oppressor by rewarding you. But anyway, about behaviorism, which talks about his techniques and his philosophies, and then you read Beyond Freedom and Dignity, which is his application of these techniques and philosophies and his discoveries.
Wow.
I really like the For Beginners books.
Okay.
African History for Beginners. And again,
good.
even
That's
though
good.
it's for beginners books and they incorporate a lot of drawings and so if you have a adolescent or a teenager, these African History for Beginners, and again, even though like this one is compiled by Herb Boyd, this is S.E. Anderson.
Okay.
And he's a scholar and a professor. So even though the books are oriented towards youth, there's real scholarship in here. There's real scholarship. So you got Black Holocaust for beginners. You got African History for beginners, Black History for beginners. I also have
Nice.
my autographed copy is downstairs.
Nice.
Yeah.
So that's a whole collection
for beginners. Yeah. The For Beginners.
So who wrote those?
Writers and readers. Huh?
Who wrote those?
They're all different. Like this was Denise Dennis, Herb Boyd, and S.E. Anderson.
Okay.
And F.C. Anderson, he's a mean old lion. But his scholarship is really good, but he just doesn't suffer fools. But I had an opportunity to go to his discussion when this book was first published way back in the 90s. Oh, this is a minute. I was a little college kid. When did this come out? I think like 94. But he was giving a talk on the day this book was published, and 95. So yeah, I was a baby. But 95. In 95 when the book was published, I went to his public talk. So I started buying all of these up from Nubian Heritage, which they had a bookstore. They've kind of moved on in downtown Brooklyn. Nubian Heritage. I got all of the, but I got some nonfiction. When Touch Becomes Luxury. This by Devin Wright. He's on the socials at Devin Wright. Get your copy. This is an independent author. When Touch Becomes Luxury, it's like conscious and progressive fiction and novels. Everybody mad at Claud Anderson, and I think y'all should be mad at Claud Anderson. But Powernomics, Black Labor, White Wealth, and his 2-volume series, Dirty Little Secrets. He wrote this one with his son, but he has another one. This is volume 2. All my volume 2s are up here, but my volume 1s are down. So Dirty Little Secrets, man, he just tell it. So Claud Anderson, I know we should be calling him out for his playing footsies with the ADOS, but Yeah. Dick Gregory, rest in peace. This
Oh
book
yeah,
was a
yeah, yeah,
gift
yeah.
given
Rest
to
in
me on
peace.
my birthday.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I read his biography. Nigger was one of the first biographies I ever read.
Mm.
And it was just amazing.
Yeah, I
It's
love
one of
Dick
the most,
Gregory too.
and I know the autobiography of Malcolm X carries a lot of weight. But
Sure.
if I had to compare, and I know this might be sacrilege, but Dick Gregory's biography is not better than Malcolm X. But I believe if there was a top 5 list of biographies
Yeah.
by icons in the various struggles of Black liberation, I would put Dick Gregory's. But this was one of the last. I think this book was definitely published after his death, that his son put out. Shout out to Dick Gregory's son. And I don't think that we talk or read enough about Booker T. Washington.
Okay.
I didn't even recommend the John Henry Clark book, but Up from Slavery. Booker T.
Mm.
Washington. Many of us don't even understand how prominent Booker T, because you don't see Booker T. Washington's on T-shirts. He ain't got no holidays.
That's
And
true.
but Booker T. Washington is probably since one of the most influential. I think every Black person that's in the United States that's engaged in struggle, or any Black person that's engaged in struggle, is pretty much, he's the litmus test of where you fall on his conclusions. He was the first like universal Black leader. Like,
Yeah.
we have that concept, and every Black leader is some type of metamorphosis or bastardization. Every major Black organization is some type of metamorphosis of Booker T. Washington. And I think if we understand his flaws and his strengths, we would better understand some of the pitfalls we always fall into when we organize for mass struggle or mass rebellion within the Western Hemisphere. So,
Sure.
these
Yeah.
are just books I
Those
have
are
on the
good.
shelf, and
For sure. And I'll put down the name down in the description for sure
yeah.
of the books.
I used to always recommend Dale Jones's books, but everybody tell me they either can't find the book or the books are $800.
Yeah, those are
And
difficult. I tried to find them after your book review, and it was kind of tough.
yeah, I actually spoke with his granddaughter.
Okay.
I spoke with his granddaughter quite some time ago about trying to see. So I'm on it, because I think Dale Jones's book should not fall into obscurity.
Yeah.
So, and not
Yeah.
just the Culture Bandit series, but he also wrote a book called Black Holocaust 2000. He wrote a post 9/11 book, which he came and presented at my bookstore at the time, for Blacks only.
Yeah.
And his wife Corinda, she wrote about veganism and holistic health. She was actually her book, Maintaining Our Temples. So
Okay.
anyway,
Right. Appreciate
I won't
that.
hold you.
Before I give you the last word, I gotta say shout out to my wife, man, because you be getting me in trouble, man, because my wife is like, yo, Diallo always speaks about his wife on his show, and you don't talk about me on your podcast. So,
Tell her regret. She gonna regret that, because my wife be like, keep my name, because she thinks I say some out of pocket.
oh man. So shout out to my wife.
So good.
But
Yeah,
anyway,
okay.
but yeah,
Just do it like I just say some reckless things. Tell some of y'all business, and she won't bother you.
Tell some of our business on the podcast.
Sometimes I would come home from the radio station, and she'd be like, "Why would you say that?" And then I wouldn't want to tell on myself,
Right.
that because I said a lot of shit and I don't know what she's referring to. So when she says, "Why would you say that?" I'm like, "Well, you know how it goes, and it was early in the morning. Now you know I went to bed late, so because I really be thinking, what did I say? And if I say the wrong thing, I'm just adding to it.
Yeah.
So
all right, man.
she might regret that. I don't know.
Hey,
but maybe you better than me.
Nah. Yeah, so can you please, before you go, man, let the people know, if where they can follow you, websites, all that. Do you still got the African World Order?
Yeah, you can get some merch on AfricanWorldOrder.com. I fixed the bugs with that site, and new merch will be posted soon.
Yeah, I got a couple of those shirts from my kids.
Yeah, I got the pictures. I think I put that on the Instagram.
You did. That was dope,
and the little Panthers. So African World, you can go to DialloKenyatta.com, which is a website. I'm updating that too. And at Diallo Kenyatta across the socials. I'll be outside. I'm mad accessible.
You in these streets?
Yeah.
That's what's up, man. I
Well,
appreciate
not I would say I'm in these community gardens. And
Yeah, that's where it's
these,
at.
I'm in these farmers markets. I'm not in the streets by any definition or any context, but I'm in these local theaters, independent theaters. I'm places.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just about everywhere except the
Museums.
streets.
Museums.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
I'm in these science and industry museums.
Yeah, no doubt, man.
There's other places to be. I utilize the streets to get to those places.
Right, you have to walk through
That
them.
qualifies as being in the streets, though.
You have to walk or bike to them, right?
Right. I'm in these bike lanes. There you go. Let's start saying that.
Yeah.
I be in these bike lanes.
All right,
So,
man.
yeah.
I appreciate you, man. Thanks a lot,
I
brother.
appreciate you too, brother. And until next time, man. Invite me back in the future. Peace.
Appreciate you. Yeah, that'd be great. Peace.
All right.
All right. Once again, we give thanks to Diallo Kenyatta. Make sure you follow him on social media at Diallo Kenyatta. Go to AfricanWorldOrder.com. Definitely check out the books. The brother recommended some very good reads, some very important reads. And we appreciate you for watching. We appreciate you for listening. Please like, share, subscribe. Share this video, please, with your friends, with people, anybody who you think may need to hear any of this. Hit us up, vitalhoops.net, Vital Hoops Podcast at gmail.com. And listen, we got a lot more coming up. There's a lot going on today in the world. Make sure you stay on the right side of history. Vital Hoops is for the culture. And as Bro Diallo said, we need a Pan-Africanist revolutionary culture. Uhuru.